Half staggering, half crawling, the exhausted man climbed countless dunes and wind-swept valleys. His only quest was sanctuary from the searing heat and merciless sun. He was so dehydrated, he no longer remembered how he came to be wandering in the vast ocean of sand. He didn't even remember his name, for that matter. His muscles cramped and seized from lack of hydration and essential electrolytes. If the torturous journey he was on was meant as a psychological representation of hell, it was far too sadistic. The will to live propels the human body to push itself beyond reasonable limits of endurance. It's ingrained in our DNA. To survive, to stop or even hesitate, was to die. He knew that and wasn't quite ready to give up. The forensic trail of footsteps behind him were quickly erased by wind and gravity. Ahead, behind, all around, were countless other dunes. It was devastating to see more of the same barren, lifeless landscape, but it wasn't endless. It couldn't be. There had to be an end to it. He clung to the desperate notion and kept trudging ahead. At some point in the timeless trek, he topped another sand-crested hill and saw what appeared to be the edge. First, he smiled. He wanted to race for it at full speed and finally escape the punishing heat. Then he reminded himself that mirages are common hallucinations for unfortunate souls like him, lost in barren wastelands. As much as he wanted it to be real, he didn't dare hope, because if the oasis evaporated when he got there, so would his drive to keep going. He tried tempering his expectations with practicality, but the temptation to believe was overpowering. The closer he got, the more genuine it appeared. If it wasn't real, when would the cruel illusion fade? The anticipation was torture. His casual, exhausted waltz toward the edge of hell accelerated from desperation to uncontrolled excitement. The stifling air actually felt a little cooler. Maybe it was his imagination, but even the pretense was amazing. Artificial hope felt better than nothing. There were even scattered sprigs of vegetation in the direction ahead. Sparse though it was a sign life could exist there. Maybe he could too. He touched the edge of an outlier plant at the nexus between desert and oasis. Its thorny texture felt real enough in his blistered hands. He wasn't sure if mirages could also manifest physical characteristics, or if he could trust his newly joined senses. The war between wishful thinking and logic rapidly shifted. He kept sauntering along, and the vegetation grew in both frequency and in size. He slowly let go of the doubt and breathed a modest sigh of relief. He'd escaped the terrible, unexplained punishment he'd been sentenced to. The desert and its torture was behind him. The deeper he ventured, the larger the arid vegetation became. Small scrub bushes were clustered together for mutual survival, and then larger ones appeared. The temperature was noticeably cooler as the shade they provided added a natural insulation from the harsh climate. Eventually the bushes were tall enough to offer some shade. He was tempted to lie down and rest in the underlying shadow of their glorious canopy, but without water, he knew those shady groves would soon become his grave. Even further in, he discovered light moisture under the sand in a damp spot. It was insubstantial at first, but the deeper down he dug, the wetter the sandy soil became. It was a tiny underground stream which kept the tenacious plants alive. He clawed the sand and dirt with his bloody fingers to expose its elusive treasure. Just touching his scorched face with the gritty moisture was incredibly soothing, but his throat was parched beyond measure. It was imperative he received hydration soon, or he would die. "Would you like some water?" An unseen voice inquired. He thought he was hallucinating, and his mind was playing tricks on him. After looking around, however, he spotted the flesh and blood source of the generous offer. It wasn't in his head. A beautiful woman dressed in traditional Savarin clothing stood nearby. She possessed a wicker basket in her clasped hands. He nodded enthusiastically and tried to reply, but his throat was too raw. The words just croaked out, pitifully. She handed him a drinking vessel, and he downed its life-saving essence in one gulp. "May I please have some more?" he begged. She nodded and led him to a nearby spring. He thanked her profusely and cleansed his burned face and neck. Then he doused a handful down his body and exclaimed in emotional joy. Knowing spring water was very limited in such a harsh environment, he was hesitant to take more, but his smiling companion encouraged him to take what he needed. As a man who just barely made it out of a desolate graveyard, he didn't dream of anything else. beyond not expiring. Hunger pangs had been secondary to the essential need for water. Now that he was hydrated, the rumination in his stomach kicked in, but he tried to deny it. His body was exhausted. His muscles ached. His skin burned. The hunger in his belly was just one more screaming sensation demanding attention. "I shall bring you food," his attentive host promised. He nodded in humble appreciation of her hospitality. The man decided she must have been an angel. When she brought him a bowl of something to eat, he didn't even hesitate to determine what it was. It didn't matter. He was literally a beggar who had no justification in being choosy. Regardless, it was quite delicious, and he licked the bowl clean. She smiled pleasantly as he inhaled her tasty nourishment. Then she led to her humble desert hut, where he immediately collapsed. "Who are you, beautiful lady?" he timidly asked when he awoke. "How have you survived in this deadly environment? Are you all alone here? Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You literally saved my life." She appeared to have never left his side. Considerable time had passed. The sun was in the eastern sky again. It looked to be mid-morning, but for all he knew, he'd slept 2 or 3 whole days. Finally, he felt like a whole person again, and wanted to express his deep gratitude for everything. "You are welcome, Pierre. You may call me Astarte, and this desolate ocean of sand is my home. It is my pleasure to care for your needs and ease your suffering. I've been alone for a very long time. I welcome your companionship." He was stunned she knew his name. Her soft, feminine voice was both melodious and magnetic. He could scarcely look away from her sensual eyes and lips as she addressed him. He'd went from the crippling despair of a challenging ordeal to immense contentment and genuine joy, all in a very short period of time. His beautiful savior was everything a man could ever hope to find in a partner. Doubly so, in a sweltering wasteland with little hope of survival. In an intangible way he couldn't even begin to explain, he felt like they were made for each other. He smiled at the ridiculousness of his frothing admiration for her. It defied logic to be so quickly enamored with a person. "How did you come to know my name, sweet, sweet Astarte? I couldn't even remember who I was when you found me. It's a miracle you did, or I would be dead now. I declare, you are a heavenly goddess. I don't know how you've survived in these extreme conditions, but I'm eternally grateful to have discovered you and made your acquaintance. Thank you again for saving me." "I didn't save your life, Pierre. I am the inhospitable shifting sands of death. Your body still lies unconscious and dying where you collapsed and fell. I am the consuming desert around you, personified. You are nearing the end of your miserable life journey and found your way to my lonely heart. Come to me now, and we will be together, as one." Astarte held out her arms, and Pierre rose to accept her loving embrace.